Well, hello, creatives, community, and kind folks. Now imagine a great hero, a weapons master, confronting an arch rival on a giant statue. I mean, something large enough to hold a small city. And they're standing in the palm of the hand of the statue, and he's confronting their enemy. Or no, let's imagine a torrential rainstorm in a massive jungle, and it's been raining so hard that mudslides start happening in the upper reaches of the hills, and the protagonists are trying to make their way through the jungle while in the background they can hear the roar of dangerous animals or beasts or something. Or maybe there's an arena, a pit of sorts, filled with sand, two combatants ready to fight each other, gladiator style. And but something's different now. There are pits filled with fire and massive beasts chained to the walls to prevent them from escaping this dangerous pit. So today we are talking about the monk. This whole week we've been talking about the monk, and today is Third Pillar Thursday. And for those who do not know, Third Pillar Thursday represents the third pillar of exploration, with combat and social interactions representing the other two pillars. And in tabletop RPGs, exploration covers a very large range of tabletop role playing aspects. Although in many ways, we do consider exploration uh, to be very generic, and I being the self-appointed third pillarist of the tabletop RPG community, um, really encourage people to use the exploration pillar, to use the environment, location, 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 and use it in tabletop RPGs. And we're going to discuss that with the concept of the monk. Now, of course, if we've already destroyed the trope and rebuilt the trope of the monk all week long, but now we're going to talk about some of the locations, both fantastical and dangerous, that our monk-like PCs can find themselves in. So, one part of exploration, of course, is exploring the unknown, going to unknown parts of a setting and discovering things. And the, to make this very simple, and I don't mean to be sarcastic, but the part of getting knowledge when it comes to exploring places is A, having a place to explore, and B, getting the reward of being gifted with that knowledge. So, of course, you can Google concept art of some extremely fantastical places. And as we discussed before, with the monk being very acrobatic and dynamic, and also not being a specialist, especially when it comes to the use of statistics, stats like strength and dex, wisdom and constitution, and all that kind of business. I think the environment itself should reflect that, so that it's not just about overcoming physical challenges, which would be awesome. All the aspects of running, jumping, swimming, balancing and dodging and maneuvering through a fantastical world, whether it's trying to navigate through the canopy of a massive jungle, or the trying to climb and swing one's way through the underside of a floating island that's high in the clouds, or navigating around the body of a massive statue that might have been the petrified form of a dead god or something like that, what have you. Of course, even the classic entering inside of the maw of a massive snake or beast to explore its internal organs or whatever. I mean, just all of these things combined together could be great locations for the player characters to explore. And in addition to exploring them, of course, the idea is to reward the players for exploring those places and finding some reward for it. And sure, you could be as very simple as, Anakin, I have the high ground. um, but it could be even more dynamic than that, whether it's finding hiding places or finding the upper ridge of a mountain pass and finding out that, hey, if I just strike this one area in the right way, it will dump, massive tons of stone on top of my enemies if they follow me here. Or that a reward might be just finding more background about their enemies, weaknesses, how many enemies there are, what plots they have involved, or even if the player characters are going after the MacGuffin, finding out how well the MacGuffin is protected. Could the MacGuffin be captured villagers that you're trying to release from a slaver, or is the MacGuffin a magical device like a gemstone or a magic rod or something that must be recovered, that is kept in a crypt or massive box or a cage or something protected by a massive beast or something. So finding out all that information, maybe being able to sneak one's way past an enemy line, or figuring out how to, without the ability to fly, how to get to that flying island to get to the hanging city that's underneath it to assault the place. So just giving that kind of knowledge, but exploration even goes further than that. So especially in a martial style world, exploration also is about the location. You guys know I am a consummate lover of television and movies, and one of the great things about them is finding very unique. Hey, TNS, tired knee sleep. What's going on there, man? Finding a place to have these great adventures while they're confronting their enemies. You know, a classic element of the martial arts trope is to have a battle where the hero is where the hero is doing a training montage, and then later on in the story we get to see the hero use what they've learned in their training montage from their flashback or what have you, and use that in a real life sense. So, for example, maybe there are the hero needs to practice their balance, and so they have to stand on wooden poles that have been sunk into the ground, and the poles are like steps. They're separated, but they're also steps, and they go higher and higher as they spiral into the air. And then later on in the story, maybe the player characters, in order to fight an enemy, they have to balance on top of these poles that are only wide enough for maybe one single foot. And so later in the story, maybe lava or acid or sharp blades are below these wooden poles that the player characters need to fight their enemy on. So they have to both fight their enemy and maintain their balance, while maybe there's, someone knocks over a flaming cauldron or something that sets fire to them, so they start to crumble. Maybe instead of poles, there's a challenge in the town square, and the first person to touch the ground loses, and so the player characters need to stand on the heads of the townsfolk so they don't fall down on the ground. And of course, the townsfolk want the PCs to beat ass on the bad guy who's treating them like crap. And so now they have to stand on the heads and shoulders of the people. And so it's not just a balance thing, but they also have to encourage the participants, the villagers or what have you, the townsfolk, to gather together to make sure that they stay up in the air, much like stage diving. It's like, yeah, if they don't like you, they're just going to move out the way and watch you fall to the ground or something. Um, Cameron says, I'd like to see a monk battle inside of a massive clock, like a kung fu version of the final battle in the Great Mouse Detective. Ooh, that's a boy. That's you pulled that one out of the hat. But yeah, maybe there is a massive clock with gears and pendulum swinging, and the spaces inside are tight so that even a so-called flat location you can stand on is constantly moving or ticking or grinding away. An errant long reach weapon or a piece of clothing or a cloak or a limb could get trapped inside of a gear. Maybe there are very tight spaces, so one must duck or jump over or slide or slip past or move inside of very tight locations. Very difficult to find. And well, going back to the pendulum swing, maybe you have to watch out before getting dunked in the head by something. Maybe there's even maybe the clock rings and there's massive bells, and if the bells ring, it sets off a sound so loud that it not only deafens you, but it feels like the very bones in your skull are vibrating and shattering, and it makes you almost want to make your ears bleed or something. And now, mind you, when I'm talking about all these things, I'm talking about them happening, not just something to maneuver around, but even layering them um, into the conflict itself. I mean, using the environment and giving it an initiative track, giving it statistics. Very easy to do, as a matter of fact. While, and I've said this before, some people will when I bring up these things, will say, well, it doesn't that add an extra level of complication? And my response to that is, it's no more complicated than any mid-level monster you would have to know in terms of using them or utilizing them in a stat block, right? It's just most environments are effects, difficulties, and adding in some sort of time factor, whether it is something that happens periodically at the same time, like for example, maybe in the clock tower, one corner of the clock tower, the gears move every round, and if you don't make if you make sure you are out of the way of the teeth of the gears, you won't get your clothing or your body won't get trapped in it inside of it. So that might be a hazard. And it's like, yeah, I can fight let's pick a good enemy that I haven't used, troglodytes or something, right? So you're fighting, I don't know why they're troglodytes in the clock tower. We'll come up with a reason for it later on. But you're fighting troglodytes in the clock tower, and you also need to maneuver away from the grinding gears. But maybe there's a pendulum swinging back and forth and can bop one in the head. So maybe the pendulum happens every other round, or happens on initiative 10 or 15, or it requires a deck save to make sure you maneuver, bob and weave and maneuver your head out the way, or it requires you to use the disengage action to make sure you keep an eye out for it, or it requires the expenditure of a bonus action to keep your eye out for errant moving parts that are around. And if you don't do that, then you may have, I don't know, disadvantage on that deck save to get out the way. Or maybe when you're trapped, you have to make a strength saves against a very, very strong or powerful machine. Or you get trapped in the machine, and each round it gets harder and harder to pull yourself out. And it might require a PC to help you extricate yourself from the grinding gears. And then there's also the idea of the bell tower. Maybe there's an escalating danger that as the clock gets closer to striking and the bells ringing, that everyone knows that if those bells ring, ooh, how dangerous would that be? And maybe it has, open up the book, maybe there's an effect, you come up with an effect like deafness plus some damage, or it's like a thunder wave spell, or you pick a monster with some kind of audio deafening ability for it, and it use that as a layer. So it's not just about it. It's the dynamic triangle that I'm a huge proponent of, where you have your enemy, you have your protagonists, your PCs, and then there's this other third thing that's going on in and around them that becomes the obstacle, the hazard, the complication that the PCs may have to deal with. And this may be something that the enemy has to deal with as well, especially if you've dumped very powerful enemies against your player characters, or it becomes the motivation for the win condition. All right. So a win condition doesn't necessarily mean the death of one side or the other. The win condition could be it, keeping the MacGuffin away from the other side, getting to the other side of a room, achieving a success. And some of those successes could be time based. An example would be flowing lava or something. Maybe the lava will cut one side, the protagonist, the antagonist, in half, and they will be unable to get close to each other. So the time factor might be 3 rounds, right? And sure, you can confront each other, but you're going to have to decide what side of the lava stream you're going to stand on. And so that might be the case. The classic rope bridge is another one where, hey, we have to get from one side of the of a crevice to the other side, or one side of the chasm to the other side. And so it's not just defeating the enemy, but it's defeating the enemy and getting the PCs and the MacGuffin, whether it's a heavily laden cart, escaped, enslaved villagers, or that mystical rod that you stole from the evil lich, and getting it to the other side of the rope bridge. And so it's, for me, it's just that dynamic triangle. It's the how can we complicate these things, and then getting used to it, whether it's a static environment, something simple like fog or smoke or being underwater or what have you, or a tight space like in a deep cavern and you have to climb through something, or a narrow alleyway, or just having heights like a cliff or rooftops. Maybe there's a randomized encounter type where you're in an urban environment and you don't, every time you're doing a foot chase and you run around a corner, you don't know what you might find, from the proverbial fruit cart that someone has to knock over, or city guards, or criminals in a back alley, or throngs of people shopping in a bazaar, or a construction site, or barrels of ore or oozes, or something else that's dangerous or that could complicate things like oil or ball bearings or something. I don't know, but you get the point, where the environment should be dynamic. Now, when it comes to the other aspect, so we're talking. There's close to 100 Third Pillar Thursday videos out there, so you could check any of those out. But one great thing about monks is that they are jack of all trades. I kind of related them to the bard before, and I'm thinking of them in this way as well, because they also tend to have, or are very associated with having, higher mental stats, intelligence, wisdom, especially charisma. And so using those stats in the environment might be important as well. So going back to the clock tower idea that Cam mentioned, maybe to maneuver in and around the clock tower, it's more about intelligence, like figuring out, like, hey, make that intelligence roll to figure out that, hey, in 2 rounds, the clock tower will strike, and you better hold your ears because you're going to get deafened or something. Or going through the massive jungle during the rainstorm, and there's like mudslides, and it's very difficult to navigate during the darkness hours, and you can hear enemies. Maybe you need to make nature or survival checks to maneuver yourself into the best possible position. Or you're in a desert and there's sandstorms, and finding places where there's shelter before the sandstorm hits. And oh, by the way, there are enemies chasing you across the desert sands and the sand dunes and stuff, and realizing that that lost caravan. I guess what? You made that intelligence check roll. Oh, guess what? You that caravan that became lost when they crested the dunes. Well, they actually fell into quicksand, a massive place with a bunch of quicksand and I don't know sand funnels or something like that, or whatnot, but that they slipped into it, and you can see the remnants of the caravan that got lost. But oh, the enemy is putting you now. You're between the sand, the quicksand, and your enemy, and maybe you can lead them across it, or figure out some kind of way to find something solid to stand on top of, like that desert wagon or what have you that half fell into the quicksand, and maybe that's the one of the few places you could stand on. Or maybe floodwaters have come across, so you can stand on the rooftops of buildings or swim from rooftop to rooftop or whatnot. So my what I am proposing is to make the environment dynamic enough that the player characters, you put the choice in their hands, you put the problem in their hands, and then let them decide. Like, oh, well, it's flooding and the rooftops are the only safe places. Do I want to swim from one rooftop to another, knowing that there are alligators that have been able that normally wouldn't be in this part of the city, but now that it's flooded, now there's alligators rolling around. What do I do? Cameron says, how would you adjudicate the elastic limit of bamboo trees when people are standing and running on them? Just thought it might be cool to pay homage to a scene in Crouching Tiger. Oh yes, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon has a very beautiful and dynamic scene where the main characters are essentially wire fu doing wuxia techniques through the upper reaches of the bamboo forest, and they are balancing on the flexible bamboo. And so okay, you're going to find my answer to this, despite me talking about all the complications. You're going to find my answer to this being rather simple, actually. And that is, let us not get too lost in the weeds. And what I mean by that is you can actually do this two kinds of ways. The first way is going to be super simple. The second way is going to be far more simple than you think it could be. So the first way to do this is not just Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but think about nearly all of the Assassin's League games, right? Assassin's Creed games. Okay. Yeah. The Sir Zesty of Beats. Hi there, Sir Zesty. I get up at 5:30 in the morning here in the States and broadcast at 6 a.m. Every day, Monday through Friday. So you are more than welcome to join us. Although I gather from your comments that you might, I'm not sure where you're located, but it sounds like you've had some exclamation points for that. So, but you're always welcome. So, okay. So the first way to do the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon thing, or the Assassin's Creed parkour, is to ignore it. And I know that sounds, it's like, what? Like, why would I advocate that? But when I say ignore it, what I mean is that if the player characters and the world, if this is part of the world, the running along walls, running along tree branches, running, jumping, flipping from building to rooftop and such, is a normal part of the embrace of the world, then you don't want to make that too complicated, because that's actually the cool thing. So my contention would be to ignore it. In other words, if you have movement, you can just move from one place to another, no matter how dynamic that movement may look. So the look looks complicated and mystical and fantastical, but really what they're doing is just moving from place to place. Yes. Like Tesla says, the pieces are so good they don't need to roll. Exactly. I mean, there's nothing more boring or more painful to your players to get them to not do a thing by getting them to constantly make rolls to do stuff. It's the I want to tumble roll across the table, grab a knife off the table, and hold the knife up to the throat of of someone on the other side of the table. And it's like, okay, make an acrobatics roll, right? And what you're saying to the player is make a roll, because if you fail, you're not going to do it. But if you make the roll, what benefit do they get out of it, right? Like, in other words, maybe another PC says, well, okay, if you're going to make me roll, I'm just going to stand up and walk around the table, right? Like, then they're not going to do the cool flip across the table or swing on the chandelier. It is the concept of the chandelier swing, right? It's the, do you make them roll for it or not? So there are two ways to do it. One is don't bother making them roll. Just, okay, so you have 30 feet of movement. You want to move from A to B? Great. I don't care how you get there. You just move 30 feet, tumble roll, flip, run across the wall, swing, slide. I don't, whatever, just describe it and we'll move on. Uh, Dante Unknown says you could do it just by class. The Mystic might be able to move half speed, the Samurai 3/4, the Ninja full speed. Otherwise, yeah, I'd ignore it too. Yeah, you're fine. Now, okay. So one way is to ignore it and just embrace the absurdity as part of the the thematic element of it. We're playing in a wuxia game, and if that means that part of the fight is going to be in a bamboo forest, then it's so good. Now, here's the other way of doing it. Okay, the other way of doing it is to grant. How do I say this? Don't overcomplicate it by having to have a lot of compound rolls. Just give a roll, and if someone succeeds on the roll, grant them the advantage for doing the thing, because if they fail the roll, they're going to get punished for it. So an example would be the roll across the table to grab the knife to hold it up to some kind of enemy. If you're going to do that, then if they succeed in a roll, give them something for it, like whether they get an extra die of damage, or they get to roll damage when they strike the person and get to roll advantage on the damage. Roll damage twice and take the higher roll, or give them a free action, or they're able to use it and give them a free intimidation check on some of their enemies that are around them. Or if you succeed, now that you did that dive roll or something, what did you want to do? You're like, well, I want to hold the knife up to his throat and knock his chair over and pin him to the ground. And you're like, okay, well, I'll let you do a grappling or restrain the opponent or something. Give them some advantage, because if you're going to punish them for failing, you should reward them for succeeding. And by the way, Dungeons and Dragons already has this. It's called advantage and disadvantage. Hey, if you get to a certain place, you have an advantage, and as a GM or DM, you're able to do it. So those are two other methods. And like Dante even mentions, it could be granted by certain class features, although you might not want to. You could do it by class, you could do it by ability score. You might not want to restrict it too much, because some classes might be far more badass, have some more badassery attached to them than others. We did a whole week of doing badassery things. Yeah, Dante says a feng shui. They make it sound good. Advantage, if not, just roll it. Oh yeah, if they make it sound good, give them advantage. If not, just roll it. Now, the other way of doing it, of course, is to basically just have a standard roll, like an acrobatics check, a dex check, a dex save, maybe the expenditure of a resource, like an action resource, like a bonus action or something, to balance in the bamboo forest while you're balancing on the bamboo fronds. As they flex back and forth under one's feet while you're trying to have a conversation with a jade weapon, jade bladed weapon, or bladed jade. That's actually kind of a cool name. Bladed jade sword. So the when I say you don't want to complicate it too much, we understand that it's absurd to run through a bamboo forest, or balance on the back of a speeding bullet train, or hang off of a cliffside with other ninjas hanging off the cliffside and springing off of the cliff with a rope attached to your waist while trying to swing through the air and cutting the other person's ropes or things like that. But the games are designed to allow us, you want to use the thing that is the most interactive and fun, and too many compound roles to achieve something is, it's like a Pavlov's dog reaction. Um, if you punish a player character for engaging in the environment and you punish them by giving them compound roles to do a thing, they'll never do it again. They're just going to go, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to spam that Eldritch Blast again rather than do this other unique thing, right? That's where that comes from, rather than rewarding the players for engaging in the world and giving them the opportunity, like, oh, sure, you can just punch your fellow enemies in the throat, or you could spring off the wall like the other ninjas are doing, attach the ropes and try to cut each other's ropes, right? Because no matter how many hit points you have, fall down the cliffside, you're going to have to try to scramble your way back up. That might be even more effective. So it might be kind of cool. Cameron says, sometimes I tell the players that their one roll is going against multiple DCs and that they might get one part done but not the other. Exactly. You could. This is the skill challenge thing. You're all right, D. This is the skill challenge thing that happens where some GMs or DMs and even players can get a little deep in the woods. Skill challenges are really good because you can start to stack successes to achieve a certain thing. So, for example, let's do a classic King of the Hill. Right? There's an Aztec temple steps that the PCs and enemies are trying to scale up the side of to get to the top. So a perfectly reasonable skill challenge would be you need to make 3 athletics checks to get to the top, right? But those athletics checks cost you an action, right? A movement action, a bonus action, or whatever, a combat action or something. So while you're being attacked by the jungle jaguar lycanthropes, right, in this Aztec realm, if you decide to use I'm going to use my martial arts and my bonus action to make myself a couple of flurry of blows, you're not moving anywhere. You're just standing on the steps of the steep steps of the Aztec temple to get to the top. But how many times the player character won't move anywhere unless they start making those athletics checks to move upwards to climb the stairs. And maybe it takes 3 successful athletics checks to get to the top, right? And maybe failing the check doesn't necessarily automatically mean you fall. It's the climb the mile-high cliff, make 1 check. Oh, you failed. You fall to your death. Like, okay, maybe there's something staggered in there. Like, oh, I got 1/3 of the way up. I've got 2/3 of the way to go. Okay, 1/3, second third. Okay, made my 3rd check. Boom, I'm at the top. You could also do a skill challenge, which is a confrontational skill challenge. You against an enemy. So the magic rod MacGuffin is sitting on the pedestal. You've got to get there before the other person, and you've got 1 round to do it in. Okay, make your roll, dex check or something against your enemy. High roll wins, right? High roll gets to it's the proverbial weapon on the ground, both of them unarmed, both try to reach for the same item, right? And so you can do a skill challenge against another enemy, and the same thing could happen whether it's I need to get across the rope bridge before the enemy cuts the ropes on the rope bridge. Who gets there first? And because the way movement is done in Dungeons and Dragons is pretty basic. Oh, I move 30 feet. They move 25 feet. I move 40 feet. It moves 50 feet. That's not very dynamic, but in the same sense, it's like, oh, I'm going to try to get across the raging river. I'm holding onto the rope so I get to the other side, but the enemy is about to set it on fire or use their hand axe to cut it. Do I grab the rope and hold on long enough before they cut it, or after? Well, it's 6 seconds. Let's make it a little bit more. Let's add some tension into it. All right, you make your roll, they make their roll. Let's see what happens first. Initiative itself is an ability check. We don't really think about it that way, but initiative is an ability check. And so when you roll initiative, that is a although we use it as a static number, it is an ability check against your enemy. Who gets to move first? Who gets to grab the sword first? Who gets to hit the button or move the lever or slide under the heavy stone pillar or door that's about to slam shut and trap everybody? Who gets to slip underneath the door before it slams shut? And so that very well could be it. Dante says, I found that dealing subdual damage for failed checks, but letting the progress still be made to be a good process. They still climb or jump, but just bust knuckles or twist ankles adds to the danger. Exactly. The save or die thing, while not as common, you also don't want to do the save or fail. You might want to. It might be the you don't want to do the save or suck too often, because it really will prevent your players from really want to engage in environment. What you might want to do is, instead of just causing physical damage, just cause some kind of complications. Half movement, like you said, twisted ankle. Maybe there's half movement. Maybe someone loses an item. Forward progress gets stalled or goes backwards. The idea of like, oh, you're climbing up the cliff. You failed a climbing check. Okay, your hand slips and you fall back down 20 feet. So now you're like, oh, I'm trying to scale up the muddy hill, and that might be the danger in it of 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. There's other things as well, like that complicate issues. Like I bring up the idea of your hands being full. Right? How many how many somatic spells can you cast while scaling up that muddy hill during the rainstorm in the jungle, while you're grabbing onto vines and trees and such, right? You're climbing up that cliffside, and you're trying to do the G.I. Joe Storm Shadow fight with the ninjas on the side. And do you really have time to use a somatic spell? I don't know. That frozen wasteland and the frozen fingers kind of thing. And it goes on from there, whether it's the clock tower bell rings and it's very noisy, and no one can hear your verbal instructions. Maybe that prevents a bard from giving inspiration to someone, or giving instructions to that charmed ogre that you charmed in the clock tower, because they can't hear you, or and whatnot. And it moves on and on and on from there, whether it's spells, whether it's people's actions. It's the idea of the player character is like, I'm going to ready my sword and my bow and my spear with my shield in my hand, and also my spell focus and my my magic opponents. And you're like, where are you holding this? Because apparently something is stuck in your butt cheeks, right? Like, it's that idea. So sometimes the environment itself can just complicate things, just simply because of sight, sound, movement, that kind of thing. Yeah. Not exactly sure what you would want to hold in your butt cheeks, but listen, if you're facing someone and that long pole arm just seems to be floating in the background behind them, just assume that they've clapped cheeks together to hold the pole arm. Okay, so another part of using the environment, especially when we're talking about martial arts and wuxia, is that very rarely do we have, say, wisdom or charisma checks to navigate through the environment. Using wisdom, it very much, wisdom's related to perception and investigation. Yeah. Not what I meant when I said use the hammer space. Yeah. You. Hey, my character's got 7 space. What was it? Was it Pathfinder, where you have spaces to hold magic items? And they're like, how come I can't use my backside space? Uh yeah, you're like, well, you could hold the rod, but you might not want to hold a potion or a ring or something back there. Might lose it. Although if it's inside of you, hmm, hmm. So the the idea of perception and investigation in the environment might reveal some various kinds of things. And like I've always been a proponent of using and abusing the environment too. So again, knocking that enemy down the muddy hill because of the rainstorm, or cutting the bamboo branches to make the enemy fall off of the bamboo branches because they're not as agile as yourself, or Assassin's Creeding yourself across the rooftops and leg tripping an enemy so they slide off the angled roof and fall on the shingles and fall and bust their head or something. I think should be an option for the player characters, because it's better than spamming that Eldritch Blast again, right? Maybe the city guard that's following you on the streets below while you're free running across the rooftops doing your best Assassin's Creed techniques. Maybe there's a way for you to, run, jump, and Jason Bourne your way through open windows and balconies and things to get the hell away from the city guard, rather than I'm you know I'm going to jump down to the street and kill them all, right? Which might not be a very good option. If especially if you are in the right, but you're just trying to get the MacGuffin out of the city. So, lastly, charisma checks are very rare when it comes to using the environment. But since we're talking about monks and martial arts, maybe the environment is alive. Maybe there's a spiritual element to it, like a massive mountain that is made it difficult for the player characters to navigate through it, and they need to make their charisma checks to talk to the spirits that are becoming a hazard or obstacle, standing in the way of where the player characters need to go. Maybe those uh, narrow crevices and high spires and plateaus that are crumbling, and I don't know, a narrow valley that's moving in together, and the cliffside that's dangerous. Maybe there's something alive about it, and to navigate through it, the characters need to do a charisma check. As a matter of fact, I even wrote an encounter for um, the adventure keys for cinematic. I mean, for Critical Hit Publishing, in which there was a mountain pass called the Two Brothers, two dwarven brothers that used to battle each other, and their spirits were still in the mountains. And really, there's no physical way to move out of the way of one mountain to the other. There's no physical way to do it, but you could convince the dwarven brothers to allow you to pass by to navigate around the dangers, and therefore it becomes maybe a charisma check, much like convincing the treants to let you get through the dark forests. The same thing might happen for the environment, where those open pits that might swallow you up instead, or the quicksand in the desert. Maybe there's some kind of like dust devil, literally swirling in the desert without having to have a stat block. It's just part of the environment, and the PCs are talking to the. I know I'm butchering the cultural aspects of it, but like there might be like kami and other elemental spirits that don't particularly like people passing through their regions, or want to know why it is you're passing through them, or request of the people who are passing through them to honor them or intimidate them or pacify them, or lie to them. Maybe performance is necessary to get through a place, or to explain where your bloodline is from, or whatnot, or to appease to the better part of valor for some of the spirits that are in the world. And so that massive fog cloud that moves in, giving everyone disadvantage on their ranged attacks, maybe the best way to avoid it is a charisma check, as opposed to acrobatics and relying on the more physical aspects of the world. Or maybe the exploration of it is, we need to find the spirit that allows us to get past this hazard in the first place. Getting to the top of that Aztec temple. Maybe there's a spirits of the old Aztec war that was going on in and around this temple. And it's very difficult to get to the top, but you have to appease the spirits that are also battling in the periphery of your vision, and speak to them to allow you an easier way method to get to the top or something like that. I don't know. Again, I'm pulling this stuff out of my ass, but we don't need to limit ourselves because we have a pretty good engine when it comes to like 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons or any other game. There's usually a pretty robust engine, and you just use pieces of that engine to get the player characters to do other things other than, I hit it with my sword, it hits me with its sword, and playing the game of attrition. Maybe success is far more than, maybe success has nothing to do with killing the thing. Maybe success is maneuvering around it or appeasing it or slamming that door shut to keep the enemy on the other side might be far more effective. Like I said, the player character that dumps massive amounts of stone on 6 ogres is more effective than the PC who's able to one-shot an ogre every round when the other PCs cannot. It's about effectiveness, not damage. But anyway, guys, we've come to the end. I do have to head off to work. Sorry. But thank you very much for joining me. Who's somebody that new that joined in? Sir Zesty of Beats. Zesty Beats there, or the zestiness of the beats, I guess, maybe very flavorful. Thank you very much for joining, everybody. D, what's going on here? Yeah, I get the idea for the what happens when there is autocorrect and who's the other person? Legally Blind Lurker. That happens. Legally Blind Lurker a lot with the auto correcting from the voice thing. So I try to read into what you guys are saying, which is perfectly fine. It's all right. Cam, thank you very much for just being a positive support there, dude. I really appreciate it. All of you don't have to get the hell up at the crack of dawn to be with me, and so I'm just pretty glad that you guys spent some time and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, D. We will talk. Yesterday I did at the end of the show I dumped a whole bunch of like some of my favorite visual martial arts. So now I'll give some honorable mentions for some martial arts that I might not have mentioned that are visual. When I say visually, I don't mean they're effective or not effective, but are really cool to look at. So I went over far too many yesterday, but I will say that like traditional hard martial arts, karate, board breaking, those kind of things. Take a look at a ton of Okinawan arts. They may not be the most dynamic visually, but the toughness level on a lot of these artists are just, it's incredible. The body control that a lot of them have, whether it's like balancing on the point of a spear. And now there's a trick to some of those things, but still balancing on spears, getting bats broken up against shins. The Kyoshiko 100-man fight where a sensei ends up fighting 100 combatants one after another. Mind you, pretty much dead on his feet and whatnot, but still, that's pretty hardcore. So take a look at a lot of those kind of things. Look up a lot of soft art martial arts, but type in either like practical applications or used fast. If you ever take a look at like I mentioned, Bagua, Zhang, Tai Chi, some of those softer Chinese arts, and I was about to say 7-star Mantis, Snake Style. Like taking a look at them done at double speed or practical speed or combat speed is pretty damn awesome using those. And of course, around the world, we have plenty of martial arts. Indigenous peoples here in the States have knife fighting skills. There is a wild ground-based martial art based on native peoples, and I don't know the name of it. That is like it's related to Salat, Haramu, and Capoeira. That's also really cool to take a look at. So I might dump a couple more links into the Discord. But anyway, guys, I got to get out of here. I got to head off to work. Everybody have a great one. I'll see thee tomorrow for Future Friday. Oh, Future Friday tomorrow is Perfection Incorporated. I might be able to even open the link now that I figured out how to get around it. So, guys, please like, share, subscribe, spread the word to your friends and family. Everybody have a great one. I'll see thee later. Bye. Let's get on out of here.